Y'all, today we need to talk about Wizard101's level 170 damage cap. I'm late to this, but it's worth talking about. They have changed the damage cap yet again at max level. So if you've been like, working around with your stats, what you might have noticed after this update is that after a certain point, your damage doesn't get higher. So right now, right, I got 230 damage. If I put on this gear set mount, it adds 8 fire damage to my stats. But instead of going up to 238, it only goes up to 237. Let's say I take this pet. This has 3 damage talents, and I replace it with this pet, right? This is a pet that has every damage talent, along with another talent that boosts each damage talent by 1. You would expect a gigantic increase from the 238 we were just at. It only goes up by 1. So now, regardless of how high your damage can go, I would assume that at some point you're going to hit a wall at around 237 to 238 damage. Now, this is weird because before this update, there was no real damage cap for PvE. If I were to run a pet like this, if I were to use damage jewels for every single circle slot, and if I were to put on as much damage as I could on my main gear, if I were to do all of that, I would still struggle to hit the max damage, which I want to say was 280, 290 maybe. So for one reason or another, when they released the Nightmare Dungeon, they also lowered our ability to do damage. Now keep in mind, the damage that I'm talking about is in standard mode, so if you're running the Nightmare Dungeon and you're noticing that the bosses have way more health, and you might be doing a lot less, hit for hit, it's because of this change. I find the timing a little weird, especially because of how higher health the standard mode stuff is compared to advanced content. And also because people probably just finished crafting all of their jewels, right? If you spent a bunch of dream water making all these damage jewels, now, if you have more than 2 or 3, they're basically borderline useless. So people are rightfully annoyed and mad about it, and I don't blame them. I think this is something that Wiz really needs to look at a deeper level. Because his damage cap is so low, I don't really think there's that good of an incentive to actually farm for a lot of the newer gear. If this Nightmare gear did not give the item cards that it did, I would conclude that for PvE anyways, it's actually kind of not worth going for. That's kind of wild because so many more people engage with PvE, doing stuff that's challenging on that side of content rather than PvP. So it's really weird to add weird limits like this that, one, invalidate previous efforts and also invalidate any incentive that you might feel to farm gear that just got released. What could they do to fix this? I think they should do away with damage caps in general when it comes to PvE. I know that sounds like a nuclear ass option, but I feel like this is, one of those things where the solution, instead of fixing the game that might be creating issues here, the solution seems to be focused on nerfing the player. When I'm going from world to world and finally reach Wallaroo, I don't want to feel like, I'm getting nerfed as a result of leveling up. I'd say if you do PvE and you finally made it into Wallaroo, you do have 2 big things that do happen for you. You can make damage jewels with Dream Water, which is a really big deal, right? Being able to make any of these because, you do the Freddy fight, that's a good incentive to go through Wallaroo. The other thing that you really get out of Wallaroo is, not to be too obvious with it, but the actual experience of going through a new world, experiencing a new plot, maybe, enjoying the ambiance. Listen, all of that's great. I think Wallaroo actually has a really nice pity system. It looks amazing. It actually is really fun, especially the first time that you play through it. But because you can now hit the damage cap without these and the gear isn't adding that much damage to begin with, the advantages kind of just stop there. But what about future worlds? If I can literally, look at this, right? If I can craft any circle jewel I want, I have 2 circle jewels remaining that give me 20 more damage. When level 180 comes out, is the damage cap gonna actually go up past 20 if this is where it is right now with all the gear available to us? I think that's highly unlikely, so for that reason alone, I wouldn't really want to actually do anything past Wallaroo. That's the exact issue with nerfing the player instead of fixing the actual root of the problem, which maybe mob health is too low, maybe our spells are doing too much. Whatever the thing is, as our stats become unbalanced to whatever's around us, the world should respond back, right? We should have maybe mobs that are harder to kill if the damage truly is that crazy. We should just have HP on bosses go up if our damage is too crazy, right? At the end of the day, psychologically, there's no change. However, you have an incentive to keep questing. Right now, I would say Wallaroo feels like a wall with this stat cap. There's obviously some positives. I don't want to be like, this is a nonsensical choice. I think there is this idea in the Wiz community, especially when it comes to PvE, of min-maxing. If you guys have never heard that term, somewhat new to me too, but the idea basically is, right, when a PvE, best PvE setup kind of pushes you towards giving up every stat except for damage, what you'll end up doing is you'll dump all defense and you'll have every single school run basically the same setup, which is quintuple damage, mighty, you know, a bunch of circle jewels, basically give up every defensive stat for offense and just hit. And by having a damage cap that's this lower, right, you might start doing things like replacing some damage with resist. You might have more well-rounded stats. You might have people with better defensive stats and more team-oriented environments, which might be a good thing. And while I do think that's true to a certain extent, I feel like the logic still doesn't really, you know, apply to this damage cap. Let's say that I were to give up some damage on my pet for resist, right? I'm still comfortably hitting the damage cap without using most of my circle jewels for damage. I'm not even running gear that, you know, has that much. Like this robe, I could run the nullity robe, get more damage, but I don't see the change. Right, even if they're trying to make you use other things like, you know, block or shad chance or resist, whatever the PvE stat that you might want to, you know, pad a little further. Even if they're trying to make you do that, it's way too easy to hit the damage cap anyways. It still just feels like a nerf. You know, the real part about this that really annoys me is how back and forth Wiz has been with damage caps. I kind of wish they would just settle on one thing, because when they removed it, like in a recent update, I went out of my way to make a bunch of these pets. Like, you know, like a lot of these damage pets, I went out of my way to make these because they became meta. I also went out of my way to make a bunch of, you know, circle jewels because they were meta. It's not even the fact that I went through all that effort and spent crowns, by the way, you know, now for it to be kind of like invalid. It's the fact that now, next time there is a damage cap that's more generous, I'm not even sure I'm gonna chase it because of the fact that I don't know if they're gonna lower it again. So I kind of wish that Wiz would just settle on one thing. If it were up to me, I think what I would do is remove the damage cap altogether and just raise mob health and boss health to accommodate for that. Like, I don't think anyone cares about mobs having a few thousand more health if our damage gets capped from, you know, 240 to like 280. That would also make things like standard mode potentially easier, because you could have, you know, one person have a ton more damage and one person really go into resist to accommodate for it. You could like play in the extremes. It could add a little bit more color to like some of the stuff that people are struggling with right now, like the Nightmare standard mode, like end game content in general. Just my 2 cents on this. I think a lot of people feel very strongly about this, but let me know. Have you guys come up with cool setups now that the damage cap is lower that, you know, you find beneficial? Or do you guys just want no damage cap so you can have a little bit more freedom with the stats? I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this one. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave us a review. If you didn't know that the damage cap has yet again been changed, I hope at least the video was informative in that way. As always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.